How did you come to play the role of the Doctor in the first place?
Well, now, in the Navy, like a man called Daniel Evans, who played Tuffy Goldstein, he played starboard lookout speaking. He said to me one day, why don't you put yourself up for Doctor Who? Pat Troughton's leaving. And I said, well, I didn't know that, but they wouldn't want me. I was a sort of eccentric character actor. Why would they want me? And they said, I don't know, I think it'd be a rather good idea. So I rang my agent and I said, look, what about putting me up for Doctor Who? And there was a terrible pause on the other end of the phone. And I said, yes, I quite understand. Don't worry about it. Forget it. It's probably a stupid idea. He said, yes, I think it's a dreadful idea. But I'll ring up and try. And he rang up the producer, Derek Sherwin, and he said, I've got a suggestion to play Doctor Who. And he said, who's that? And he said, Jon Pertwee. And there was this terrible pause again from the producer. And my agent, Richard Stone, said, yes, I quite agree. I had the same reaction. And they said, no, you've got it completely wrong. We're gobsmacked up at this end. He said, why? He said, well, Jon Pertwee's name is number 2 on our short list and has been for 11 months. And I never knew it at all. So I was rung up by Sean Sutton, who was the head of programs. He was an old mate of mine, and we were in the Navy together. They saved my life in the Navy, actually. He pulled me into a passage when the bomb was dropping. It was making a very funny noise. And I thought, what the hell's that? And I put my head outside, and it was a landmine dropping on a parachute. And he grabbed me by the back of the neck, and he hauled me up this passage, and the bomb went off. And if he hadn't hauled me back, I think I'd have copped it. Anyway, he offered me the part of Doctor Who. And I said, well, can we talk about it? And he said, yes, let's have a bite of lunch. And we had lunch, and they said, you want to do Doctor Who? And I said, let me think about it. And he said, right. And he rang up the end of the week, said, do you want to do Doctor Who? I said, can we have a lunch? And he said, we've had lunch. I said, can we have another one? And he said, yes, all right, we'll have another one. So at the end of the lunch, he said, do you want to do Doctor Who? And I said, can I think about it? He said, well, you've been thinking about it. I said, I know, but it's a very big decision. So I rang him up halfway through the week and said, do you do dinners?
Did you have much control over how the Doctor's character developed?
It sounds as if I had a lot of control. Well, the answer is I had absolutely none. The reason why you don't have any control of what you're doing is because you were given you say, for example, you've been rehearsing for a week, and you then do the recording at the weekend, and then you have a day off, if you're lucky, and you're given a script for the next one. So it'll be a Sunday, so you get the script and you read it. Now you go along to the first rehearsal of that show on the Monday. Now remember that the producer has allocated a director months and months before, because he had to direct the thing, he had to arrange all the costumes, get his costume designers, his lighting engineers, his special effects, his casting, all had to be done all ready for that Monday, which was the next day as far as we were concerned. So the only input that I could have, or any of the doctors could have, would be on the read-through on the Monday, where the writers would usually be present. You'd say, no, that doesn't suit me, I don't like that, and I think it'd be better if we took that there and put that there. And if the director agreed, and the writer said that's possible, they would then rewrite that. And that was the end. You'd have no more to say, because the rest of the week, it was really taut and tight rehearsal period and time, and it had to be right. And, of course, there was people often said, oh, did you ad-lib? Well, no, of course not. Ad-libbing would be out of the question on television.
Did you play the Doctor deliberately differently from the way he was portrayed by Patrick Troughton, your predecessor?
What that was all about was that I had this theory that I wanted my Doctor Who to be a dandy, that I've dressed up in all these fancy clothes and frilly shirts and velvet jackets and so on. And I wanted him to be a dandy, but at the same time could be very active, so we brought in Venusian Aikido, which is a lot of rubbish, doesn't exist. But it did a lot of kicking people under chins. And my stuntman, Terry Walsh, was a marvellous man and instructor, and he taught me this strange thing. And I also, personally, am a complete lunatic with anything mechanical. I ride motorbikes and still do. I used to race motorbikes when I was a youth at Chipstead Grass Track years ago. And then I raced cars for a time after the war with a man called Lance Macklin. I was involved in motor racing. And I raced hydroplanes, little outboard engine racing boats. I became a skier and skied in the water ski circus and snow skied. So all these sports I've been dotty about anyway, and I said to Barry, why can't we incorporate these in Doctor Who? I had the first three-wheel Honda, that thing with the big fat tires, which infuriated James Bond producer because they did it immediately after us. We had miniature helicopters, we had jet craft, little jet boats that had chased the Master in and the Sea Devils. I had all these things. Unfortunately, it was very expensive because I always finished up buying them. which was frightfully silly, but I couldn't resist them. I said, oh, God, that's good, that jet boat's wonderful. So I bought it, and then I said, that little boat's good, that'd be useful. And so my garage got rather full, and we sort of hauled the things out to my home in the sun, and we used them for a number of years. It was my suggestion we had the old Roadster, the Bessie. In the first episode that I did, I stole an old Vauxhall 3098 car, a beautiful old car, and I drove that. And I said to the Brigadier within the script, may I keep the car? He said, no, you can't, but we'll get you another one. And that's how we got Bessie, the old Edwardian Roadster. The same thing with the clothes. Can I keep the clothes? No, you can't, but we'll send you to a tailor and you can have the same style of clothes. And I invented the Whomobile, which was this incredible space car, and a designer called Peter Farris from Nottingham, who I'd seen his work, and it was just brilliant. And I said, could you make me a car? And I explained what I wanted, and he said, you mean like this? And he did a drawing, and he showed it to me, and I said, not like that, that. And he built me that car that he drew instantaneously. Somebody said to him, how are you going to mould this? Because it had to be moulded in fiberglass. He said, how many pieces do you think you'll need to put this together? And all the experts said, oh, you'll need at least 6 pieces. So Peter said, I see, okay, and did it in 2, top and bottom. And it was an extraordinary vehicle. I was always stopped in the street by police who said, stop! Wait a minute, you can't drive a hovercraft on the road. And I said, it's not a hovercraft. You look under the skirt and you can see it's got wheels. And it was a Bond in the front and a Hillman Imp in the back. And it ostensibly had ejector seats and things like that. It didn't happen in computers and telephones long before mobile telephones. But it was a lovely vehicle. But as I say, we did have to take it off the road eventually because the tourists would look at it, and German tourists were in a Volkswagen and saying, my God, will you look? What is that? And then they wouldn't look where they were going and run straight up the backside of a bus. And so we realised we were causing accidents all over the place, so we took it on a low loader from that moment on. My attitude was that it was sort of science fiction James Bond attitude, really. And one most important thing of all is playing it straight down the middle, because it's no good being a folk hero figure if the kids and the followers aren't sure that the Doctor's going to go through and get it sorted out. You can't prevaricate by sitting on your bottom and playing a penny whistle, in my opinion. Much as I love Pat Troughton, and I thought his Doctor Who was wonderful. But I didn't agree with that attitude. But I mean, his was different from his predecessor, who was this sort of irascible professor, and mine was the sort of cerebral dandy.
What was the role of the Doctor's companions, other than needing the Doctor's help all the time?
You see, after all, the companions are translators to the public. The Doctor says something scientific gobbledygook and says the dihedral plast of the form they're being mixed with on the something, you see. And so she says, I'm sorry, Doctor, but I don't understand. And he says, well, what it really means, Joe, is this, you see, and then you explain it, and then so that the public who are listening don't feel too stupid that they didn't understand what the Doctor was talking about. That was the idea of the companion, really. So metaphorically should be the lady that is strapped to the railway line and says, help, Doctor, help, and the Doctor rushes forward and grabs her from under the wheels. And so one really sort of needed the little helpless, and that's why Joe Grant, Katie Manning and Liz Sladen were sort of smaller in stature, and I looked protective with my cloak, the mother hen's wings, round the little children.
What did you think of the Daleks?
I didn't like the Daleks, because I've said this many times before, because you only had to go down 2 flights of stairs, and you had them, really. Although now I'm told they can float downstairs. They've got sort of hovercraft engines in them. But with the sink pump and the egg whisk and the tennis ball stuck all over them, it didn't seem very frightening to me, although the kids and the public loved them.
Why do you think so many adults watch Doctor Who when initially it was aimed at a younger audience?
The reason, I think, is because it's escapist. I think people at that time were sick of the kitchen sink. They wanted something more glamorous. For some strange reason, science fiction attracts fandom like nothing else. There are science fiction conferences all over the world. I go all over the English-speaking world to Doctor Who conferences. Not so much now because America are not playing it any longer, really. But at one time they did. And they play science fiction series that have been defunct for 25 and 30 years, and they still hang on to them because science fiction does attract fans in an extraordinary way. I mean, you would have conventions of science fiction, whereas you'd never have conventions of Wurzel Gummidge, no matter how popular it was.
Why do you think Doctor Who has enjoyed such long-term appeal?
Because it's been playing almost continuously. The videos are enormously big sellers. Now we've helped it move it along even more with doing it on radio. But I say it eventually, it had to come to an end.
Why did you leave the show?
The reason I left, because I did 5 years, and I thought that was plenty, and I didn't want to bury myself forever in it. I wanted to do other things. Mark Ure had a lot to do with the fact that the team broke up. Barry Letts was leaving. Terence Dix, the editor, he was leaving. And there was a whole break-up of team, and of course I lost my great friend Roger Delgado, who played the Master. He'd been killed in a motor accident. And so I thought it was the end of an era and it was time to go.
Do you mind that you've been typecast as Doctor Who?
Yes, I cared desperately and still do. I mean, it's an infuriating thing that I go up for somebody. For example, I was in my agent's office not that long ago, and somebody was on the phone to her and said, I want an extremely old general who's an alcoholic, who's got gout, and had been in the Indian Army. And I heard this, and I said, me, I mean, I couldn't think of anything nicer than an Indian Army colonel with gout, 90 years old, great, marvellous character role, cameo. So I said, me, I'd like to do that. And she said, well, I've got somebody sitting here now who would love to do it. And she said, who is it, Jon Pertwee? She said, oh, that'd be ridiculous.
You've now done 2 Doctor Who radio series. How does the visual nature of Doctor Who translate to radio?
Well, it's very easy, really, because it entirely depends on people's imagination. I much prefer radio as a medium, really, to anything else, because you can do what you like on radio. You can go where you like. And for special effects, of course, it's superb, because you can have a special effect on a gramophone record, which has cost you 50 pence, as opposed to special effects being done on television, which could cost you thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pounds. So, in the main, you've got much greater freedom on radio than you have on television or film.
Do you think the radio series is attracting a new audience? Or is it the same old Doctor Who fans who've been watching the show for years?
Yes, you know, people are very used to listening to me on radio, and therefore I think I've brought a number of people with me, as it were, to listen. And, of course, all the Whovians, all the fans listen automatically, like they buy the tapes automatically. If there's a new video comes out, the shopkeepers pretty well know to a cassette how many they're going to sell. It's extraordinary. I came to be involved in the radio series by the simple expedient of suggesting it myself. When Doctor Who was finished on television, I thought, well, now's the opportunity to get in something I've always wanted to do, which is do Doctor Who on radio. I suggested it to Dirk Maggs, who's one of the sort of top directors. I had done Superman for him before. And he thought that's a splendid idea. The BBC are not frightfully quick at getting away with these things. I think it took us 2 years or something to get it eventually into the studio, but we did, and we did The Paradise of Death. I was asked who I'd like to write it, and I said, well, there's only one man to write it, and that's Barry Letts, because Barry was an actor of considerable repute, was my producer for most of my tenure as Doctor Who, and I appreciated him very much as a producer and a director and a writer. He used to write quite a number of our Doctor Who stories, under a pseudonym, I think, because I believe it was illegal. I don't think he was allowed as a producer to actually write them, but he did, and he wrote under the name of Guy Leopold, and the scripts were absolutely splendid, some of the best Doctor Whos we ever did. So we got Barry to write The Paradise of Death, and it was away. It was a very big success. So successful that the BBC decided that they would do another one. It took them about 6 or 7 months to make up their mind to do another one. And then they said, yes, we're going to do another one. And we did, months later. And then we said, when's it going to go out? And they said, oh, next year. It was about 11 months later, and it's just going out now. And that's ahead of time. So, in fact, we've only done 2 in a couple of years, whereas we should be doing about 5 a year, I would think, because they sell like mad. Do you know that we were actually in the top 10 I couldn't believe this. Somebody said, "You're in the charts." And I said, "Well, you can't be. That's for pop music." And they said, "No, it's so successful. It sold so many. It's actually in the charts." I think we came in at number 32 or something like that, which was wonderful. And so we sold well with it.